Some debts are paid with money. Others are paid with lives. When a struggling waitress unknowingly became connected to one of Chicago's most powerful enemies, she had no idea the most feared mafia boss in the city was already planning to use her for revenge. Rain drifted across the streets of Chicago like a gray curtain, turning neon lights into blurred streaks of color. The city never slowed down, not for storms, not for heartbreak, and certainly not for people like Lila Bennett. At 25 years old, Lila had learned that survival often depended on how well a person could hide their struggles from the world. Every morning began the same way. An alarm before sunrise, a quick check on her grandmother, a silent calculation of bills she couldn't afford. Then another exhausting day. Lila worked 2 jobs simply to keep their small apartment and pay for the medications her grandmother desperately needed. Sleep was a luxury. Rest felt impossible. Yet she never complained. Years of hardship had transformed her into someone emotionally controlled, someone who carried pain quietly because there was no other choice. Most people who met her described her as calm, strong, independent. None of them understood how much fear existed beneath that carefully controlled exterior. Fear of losing her grandmother, fear of eviction, fear of becoming completely alone. The fear followed her everywhere. It sat beside her during long shifts. It whispered through sleepless nights. It waited inside every unexpected phone call. Yet despite everything, Lila continued moving forward. She had survived worse. Childhood had taught her that lesson. Growing up, instability was constant. Family secrets, financial problems, and emotional wounds shaped her into someone who trusted very few people. Even now, she preferred keeping others at a distance. Dependence felt dangerous. Expectations often led to disappointment. Her life remained simple. Work, home, hospital visits. Repeat. The routine protected her from chaos. Or so she believed. That evening, Lila reported to her second job at an exclusive event venue located inside one of Chicago's most luxurious hotels. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers while powerful guests moved through the room dressed in designer suits and expensive jewelry. The atmosphere felt different from her normal world. This was where influence lived, where powerful families built alliances, where empires quietly expanded. Lila had no interest in any of it. She simply needed the extra income. Carrying a silver serving tray, she moved through the crowd unnoticed. Wealthy guests discussed investments, business acquisitions, and private opportunities worth millions of dollars. Their conversations felt distant, almost unreal. For someone struggling to afford groceries, that world might as well have belonged to another planet. Then the atmosphere changed. The shift was immediate. Conversations softened. Attention moved toward the ballroom entrance. Even the hotel's management seemed nervous. Curious, Lila glanced toward the doorway. Several men entered first. Security. Professional. Disciplined. Silent. The kind of men who didn't need introductions. A moment later, another figure stepped inside. Tall. Powerful. Completely composed. Damian Cross. Though Lila didn't recognize him, nearly everyone else did. Publicly, he was one of the most influential businessmen in America. Privately, he controlled one of the most powerful syndicates in Chicago. His empire stretched across industries, cities, and alliances few people fully understood. A king hidden behind a billionaire's smile. As Damien moved through the ballroom, people adjusted around him instinctively. Respect followed him. Fear followed him. Power followed him. Lila looked away almost immediately. Men like him belonged to a world she would never enter. Several minutes later, she approached a private table carrying drinks requested by event organizers. The task seemed ordinary, routine, forgettable. As she carefully placed a glass beside Damien's seat, something unexpected happened. A photograph slipped from the folder resting near him. The image landed face up on the table. Lila barely noticed. Damien did. His eyes immediately shifted toward her, then toward the name printed on her employee identification badge. Lila Bennett. For a brief second, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Recognition. Shock. Calculation. The atmosphere around him became dangerously still, because the surname Bennett belonged to a family Damien had spent years investigating. A family connected to old betrayals, old wars, old debts, and standing directly beside him was a woman carrying that name without the slightest understanding of what it truly meant. As Lila turned to leave, unaware of the attention now focused on her, Damien continued watching. For the first time in years, revenge had unexpectedly taken human form, and her name was Lila Bennett. Damien Cross spent 10 years planning revenge against the family that destroyed his father. He never expected the final piece of that revenge would be an innocent waitress who had no idea she was part of the war. The moment Lila Bennett walked away from his table, Damien remained perfectly still. The ballroom continued buzzing with conversations, champagne glasses, and carefully rehearsed smiles, but his attention stayed fixed on one thing. Her last name, Bennett. For most people, it meant nothing. For Damien Cross, it reopened wounds that had never fully healed. 10 years earlier, his father had built one of Chicago's most respected business empires. Publicly, they were powerful entrepreneurs. Privately, they operated within a complex network of syndicates, alliances, and loyalties that stretched far beyond ordinary business. Then everything collapsed. A betrayal destroyed his father's reputation. Trusted allies disappeared. Partnerships fractured. An empire nearly fell overnight. The name Bennett appeared repeatedly throughout those events. Not as the mastermind, not as the architect, but as a bloodline connected to the people responsible. Ever since then, Damien had lived with one purpose. Revenge. Not reckless revenge. Calculated revenge. Patient revenge. The kind built over years. At 36, Damien had become everything his enemies feared. Publicly, he was a billionaire controlling luxury hotels, technology investments, and real estate across the country. His name appeared on magazine covers and business rankings. Privately, he was a king, a ruler whose influence shaped entire syndicates, a man who understood power better than most people understood themselves. Power required control. Control required patience. And patience had finally delivered something unexpected. Lila Bennett. Back at the estate later that night, Damien reviewed the preliminary reports his intelligence team gathered within hours. The information surprised him. Lila wasn't wealthy. She wasn't connected to criminal organizations. She wasn't benefiting from the Bennett family legacy. Quite the opposite. She was struggling, working 2 jobs, supporting her elderly grandmother, living in a neighborhood most wealthy people avoided. The deeper he investigated, the more confusing the situation became. Nothing about her matched the image he expected. She seemed honest, hardworking, quiet, emotionally controlled. A woman carrying burdens she never spoke about. For the first time, uncertainty entered his calculations. The feeling annoyed him. Revenge was supposed to be simple. Yet the more he learned about Lila, the more complicated everything became. Over the following week, Damien arranged several encounters that appeared accidental. A charity event, a luxury restaurant, a business function requiring temporary staff. Each time, Lila happened to be there. Each time, Damien observed her more closely. And each time, the same conclusion emerged. She knew nothing. Nothing about syndicates. Nothing about old betrayals. Nothing about the war that shaped Damien's life. Yet despite her innocence, she remained connected to the bloodline he hated. That connection was enough. Or at least it should have been. One evening, Damien stood alone inside his penthouse overlooking Chicago's skyline. Rain reflected across the glass while city lights stretched endlessly beneath him. A strategic opportunity had finally appeared. Marriage. The idea arrived suddenly, then refused to leave. If Lila became his wife, the symbolism would be powerful. The Bennett name would become part of his empire. The family connected to his father's downfall would forever be tied to the man they once tried to destroy. The revenge would be complete, elegant, permanent, controlled. For the first time in years, Damien felt satisfied with the plan. Emotion had no place in it. Only strategy, only power, only closure. The following days moved quickly. His team quietly examined Lila's financial situation. Medical expenses connected to her grandmother continued growing. Debt accumulated faster than income. The pressure surrounding her life became increasingly impossible to ignore. She was surviving, barely, and Damien knew exactly how to solve every problem. The realization strengthened his plan. When the invitation finally arrived, Lila assumed it was another temporary event assignment. Instead, she found herself sitting inside one of Chicago's most exclusive private restaurants overlooking Lake Michigan. The atmosphere felt surreal. Luxury surrounded everything. Crystal chandeliers, private security, floor-to-ceiling windows, and across the table sat Damien Cross, the most powerful man she had ever met. For several moments, uncertainty filled the silence. Lila's heart pounded, not because she was attracted to him, because she couldn't understand why she was there. Meanwhile, Damien studied her carefully. The fear, the caution, the determination hidden beneath exhaustion. Unexpectedly, curiosity returned. Dangerous curiosity, the kind that threatened perfectly designed plans. Still, he pushed the feeling aside. Control remained everything. And this was business, nothing more. Finally, Damien slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents capable of changing Lila's entire life. Medical support for her grandmother. Financial security. Protection. A future free from constant struggle. In exchange for one thing. Marriage. As Lila stared at the contract, shock flooded her expression. And while she struggled to process what she was seeing, Damien already knew one thing. The proposal before her was far too valuable to ignore. And the decision she made next would change both of their lives forever. Lila believed she was entering a marriage that would save her family. She had no idea she was stepping into a carefully planned revenge scheme. For 3 sleepless nights, the contract remained untouched on the small kitchen table inside Lila's apartment. Every time she looked at it, her heart pounded. The offer felt impossible, almost unreal. On one side stood the life she knew. Endless bills, uncertainty, and the growing fear that her grandmother's health would continue declining faster than she could afford to help. On the other side stood Damien Cross. Power, security, protection, a future free from constant survival. The decision terrified her. Yet every hospital invoice pushed her closer toward an answer. Eventually, reality won. Lila signed. The moment the contract was returned, her life changed completely. Within days, Chicago's media exploded with speculation. Newspapers, social media accounts, and business reporters all carried the same shocking headline. One of America's most powerful billionaires was marrying an unknown waitress. Nobody understood why. The mystery only increased public fascination. Meanwhile, Lila struggled to understand it herself. The wedding took place 6 weeks later inside a breathtaking cathedral overlooking Lake Michigan. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand hall, while Chicago's elite gathered beneath towering ceilings decorated with gold and ivory details. Everything felt overwhelming. Designer gowns, private security, luxury vehicles stretching for blocks. For someone who spent most of her life counting dollars, the scale felt impossible to comprehend. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, uncertainty remained. Because Damien Cross remained a mystery. Throughout the engagement, he treated her with respect. He fulfilled every promise. He ensured her grandmother received world-class medical care. He protected her from financial worries she once faced every day. Still, something felt distant, controlled, as though an invisible wall existed between them. Damien remained polite, patient, careful, but emotionally unreachable. The observation unsettled her more than she expected. After the ceremony, helicopters carried guests to Blackwood Isle, a private estate owned by Damien outside Chicago. The property looked less like a residence and more like a kingdom hidden from the world. Massive gates, private gardens, elegant fountains, security teams positioned discreetly throughout the grounds. The entire place radiated power. A king's fortress. And now, somehow, it was her home. The transition wasn't easy. Every room felt larger than her entire apartment. Every meal looked prepared for royalty. Every interaction reminded her how different their worlds truly were. Culture shock followed her everywhere. Even simple things felt unfamiliar. Yet amid the discomfort, unexpected moments of warmth began appearing. Members of the household staff treated her kindly. Several longtime employees quietly welcomed her without judgment. The estate's elderly housekeeper quickly became someone she trusted. For the first time since childhood, Lila experienced something resembling family. Not because of blood, because of loyalty. The feeling brought comfort and fear, because comfort created attachment. Attachment created vulnerability. Meanwhile, Damien found himself increasingly distracted. The marriage was supposed to be strategic, calculated, temporary, a move designed to complete years of planning. Yet every day made the situation more complicated. Lila didn't behave like the enemy he imagined. She wasn't manipulative. She wasn't entitled. She wasn't responsible for the past. Instead, she spent mornings checking on her grandmother, afternoons helping staff members, and evenings quietly reading in the estate library. The more he observed her, the more his certainty weakened. Something dangerous was happening. Curiosity was becoming admiration. Admiration was becoming attachment. And attachment threatened everything. Still, Damien refused to abandon control. The truth remained hidden. The revenge remained unfinished. At least for now. Weeks passed. The emotional distance between them persisted despite growing trust. Sometimes they shared long dinners overlooking the lake. Sometimes they walked through the gardens beneath evening lights. The conversations became easier, closer, yet neither revealed everything. Lila sensed secrets. Damien carried them. One rainy evening, while searching for a book inside the estate library, Lila noticed a locked drawer slightly open inside an antique desk. Normally, she would have ignored it, but a folder partially visible inside immediately caught her attention. Her last name appeared on the cover. Bennett. Confused, she carefully removed the file. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, financial records, names she recognized, names connected to her family. As she continued reading, another name appeared repeatedly. Damien Cross. The documents connected his family and hers through events that happened years before she was born. Events involving betrayal, loss, and a conflict far bigger than she ever imagined. A cold feeling settled inside her chest, because for the first time, she realized her marriage might not be the coincidence she believed it was. And as thunder echoed beyond the estate windows, one terrifying question entered her mind. Why had Damien Cross really married her? Revenge is simple when your enemy is guilty. It becomes dangerous when you discover the person you're using is completely innocent. For the first time since the marriage began, Damien Cross found himself questioning a plan he had spent years creating. The file Lila discovered should have created problems. Instead, it created something far worse. Doubt. Standing inside his private office overlooking Lake Michigan, Damien reviewed every report his investigators had collected about the Bennett family. Originally, he searched for evidence supporting the revenge he believed was justified. Now, he was searching for something entirely different. The truth. And the truth refused to cooperate with his expectations. The deeper he investigated, the more disturbing the story became. Lila Bennett knew nothing. Nothing about old syndicate wars. Nothing about family betrayals. Nothing about the events connected to his father's downfall. She had spent her entire life carrying burdens created by other people's mistakes. The realization settled heavily inside him. Because revenge required guilt, and Lila possessed none. Over the following days, new information continued emerging. Records showed years of financial hardship, medical expenses, housing struggles, employment history stretching back to her teenage years. Every document painted the same picture: survival. While other people inherited wealth and influence, Lila inherited responsibility. The discovery made Damien increasingly uncomfortable. For years, he imagined the Bennett family as privileged beneficiaries of betrayal. The reality looked completely different. Meanwhile, Lila struggled with questions she couldn't answer. The file revealed enough to create confusion, but not enough to reveal the full story. Every document connected her family to people she never met. Every name seemed attached to secrets buried decades earlier. The uncertainty followed her everywhere. One afternoon, she sat beside her grandmother in the estate's sunroom while autumn light filled the space around them. The elderly woman looked healthier than she had in years. Medical treatments were working. Stress no longer dominated her life. For a moment, peace existed. Then Lila quietly asked about the Bennett family. The reaction surprised her. A shadow crossed her grandmother's face. Old memories surfaced. Memories she clearly preferred forgetting. Slowly, pieces of the truth began emerging. Lila learned that her parents spent years trying to escape the consequences of decisions made long before she was born. They left cities, changed opportunities, walked away from people connected to old conflicts. Not because they were guilty, because they were afraid. Afraid of becoming trapped inside battles they never started. The revelation changed everything. For the first time, Lila understood something important. She wasn't carrying a legacy of power. She was carrying a legacy of survival. The realization felt strangely liberating. At the same time, Damien found himself increasingly drawn toward her. What began as observation slowly transformed into concern, then admiration, then something even more dangerous. One evening, he noticed Lila sitting alone beside the estate gardens watching the sunset reflect across the lake. The scene felt peaceful, quiet, safe. For several minutes, he simply watched. Not because of revenge, because her presence brought a calmness he hadn't experienced in years. The realization unsettled him. Power never frightened Damien. Emotion did, because emotion weakened control, and control had always been his greatest strength. Yet every day spent near Lila made maintaining emotional distance more difficult. His protector instinct awakened in ways he never expected. He began reviewing security reports personally, checking travel routes, monitoring potential threats. Not because she was part of a plan, because he genuinely wanted her safe. The distinction mattered, far more than he wanted to admit. For Lila, subtle changes became impossible to ignore. Damien listened more carefully, stayed longer during conversations, showed concern over things others considered insignificant. Little moments slowly built trust. The emotional wall between them began cracking, not disappearing, but weakening. The connection frightened both of them, because neither fully understood where it might lead. Weeks later, Damien finally reached a conclusion he never expected. The revenge plan was breaking apart. Not because it failed, because he no longer wanted it. The realization arrived quietly and changed everything. Unfortunately, peace rarely survives for long inside a world built on power. Late one evening, an urgent report arrived from Damien's intelligence network. The information immediately captured his attention. News of the marriage had spread far beyond Chicago. Several rival syndicates were discussing it, watching it, analyzing it. One organization in particular viewed Lila's presence as a vulnerability, a weakness, an opportunity. Damien's expression hardened as he finished reading, because the report contained a warning. Someone outside the empire had started asking questions about Lila Bennett. Someone powerful, someone dangerous. And for the first time since the wedding, Damien realized his greatest threat was no longer the past. It was the people who had just decided to target his wife. The safest place in Chicago became the mansion of the man who originally married her for revenge. The warning from Damien's intelligence network changed everything. For years, danger had been something Damien managed from a distance. Threats appeared on reports, security briefings, and encrypted messages. There were problems to solve, risks to control. Now the danger had a name: Lila Bennett. The realization felt deeply personal. Within hours, security around the estate quietly increased. Additional personnel monitored entrances. Travel routes were adjusted. Surveillance systems received upgrades. Most people inside the mansion barely noticed the changes. Lila noticed immediately. She had spent too much of her life surviving not to recognize when people were preparing for trouble. Yet surprisingly, The increased security didn't make her feel trapped. It made her feel safe. The feeling was unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. For years, she had lived in apartments where broken locks remained unrepaired. She walked through dangerous neighborhoods while pretending not to notice strangers watching from corners. Every late-night shift carried uncertainty. Here, things felt different. The Blackwood estate operated like a fortress, not a prison, a sanctuary. Every morning, sunlight spilled across private gardens stretching toward Lake Michigan. Elegant pathways wound through flowers and fountains. The air felt peaceful, protected. For the first time in years, Lila stopped waking up with fear already waiting inside her chest. Healing happened quietly, one day at a time, one breath at a time, one peaceful morning at a time. Meanwhile, she slowly became part of the estate itself. The household staff welcomed her naturally. The elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Harrington, treated her like family. The chefs always prepared extra desserts because they discovered she secretly loved chocolate. Even members of Damien's security team softened around her presence. The feeling surprised her. Found family wasn't something she expected, yet somehow it found her anyway. One afternoon, while helping arrange flowers inside the main hall, Lila caught herself smiling. A genuine smile. The realization stopped her. For so long, survival had been her only goal. Now, she was learning how to live. Elsewhere, Damien watched the transformation carefully. Every week revealed a stronger version of Lila. The frightened waitress was slowly disappearing. Confidence replaced uncertainty. Curiosity replaced fear. Strength replaced self-doubt. She was not a victim. She became powerful every time she chose healing over fear. And the more Damien witnessed that transformation, the more difficult maintaining emotional distance became. His original plan felt increasingly hollow. Watching her laugh with staff members, watching her read books in the library, watching her walk through gardens without constantly looking over her shoulder. None of it aligned with revenge. Instead, it awakened something entirely different. Protectiveness. One evening, Damien found himself reviewing security reports long after midnight. Every page contained information about estate operations. Yet his attention remained fixed on one section: Lila's daily schedule. The realization irritated him. Not because he cared, because he cared too much. The word appeared again. Mine. Not possession. Not ownership. Protection. A need to shield her from every danger approaching his world. The emotion grew stronger each day. Unfortunately, emotions rarely remain hidden forever. As autumn deepened across Chicago, the relationship between Damien and Lila slowly softened. Their dinners became longer. Their conversations became easier. Silences no longer felt uncomfortable. Trust began replacing uncertainty. For the first time since the wedding, Lila allowed herself to believe the marriage might become something real. That possibility both comforted and frightened her, because trusting someone always carried risk, especially someone as powerful as Damien Cross. Then came a night everything changed. The estate hosted a private gathering attended by several senior members of Damien's organization. Business discussions filled the mansion while security remained unusually active throughout the evening. Lila intended to avoid the event entirely. Instead, while walking through a quiet corridor searching for the library, she accidentally passed an open office door. Voices drifted into the hallway. At first she ignored them. Then she heard her name. She stopped. Not intentionally, instinctively. Inside the room, two senior associates discussed Damien's marriage. The conversation seemed casual, until one sentence changed everything. A sentence mentioning revenge. A sentence mentioning the Bennett family. A sentence suggesting the marriage had never been about love, loyalty, or coincidence. For a moment, Lila couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, colder. The pieces she discovered inside the hidden file weeks earlier began connecting together. Fear returned. Not fear of danger. Fear of betrayal. As the conversation continued, one horrifying possibility became impossible to ignore. Damien Cross may have married her for a reason he never revealed. And standing alone in the corridor, listening to secrets she was never meant to hear, Lila realized the safest place in Chicago might be built on the biggest lie of her life. Nothing hurts more than discovering the person who made you feel safe was hiding the truth from the beginning. Lila barely remembered how she reached her room that night. The conversation she overheard echoed through her mind like a relentless whisper. Revenge, Bennett family, marriage. Every word felt heavier than the last. For weeks, she had slowly allowed herself to believe something impossible. She believed the man who protected her, cared for her grandmother, and gave her a safe place to heal might genuinely care about her. Now everything felt uncertain. Every memory became a question. Every act of kindness felt suspicious. Every moment of safety suddenly carried doubt. The realization shattered something deep inside her. For years, life taught Lila to expect disappointment from strangers. She never expected betrayal from the one person she trusted most. The following morning, she walked through the estate in complete silence. The beautiful gardens looked different now. The mansion felt colder. Even the lake beyond the windows seemed distant. Nothing had changed, yet everything had changed. Eventually, she entered Damien's private office carrying the file she discovered in the library. The atmosphere became instantly tense. For several seconds, neither moved. Neither spoke. The silence itself felt painful, because both of them already knew the truth had finally arrived. Lila placed the documents on his desk. The movement was calm, controlled, but her heart was pounding. She didn't need explanations anymore. The evidence already existed. Damien stared at the file before slowly lowering his eyes. For the first time since she met him, the king of an empire looked uncertain. That alone gave her the answer she feared. The revenge was real. The marriage had begun as a plan, a strategy, a calculation, and somehow that truth hurt more than she imagined. Not because of the marriage itself, because she had trusted him. The emotional distance she worked so hard to overcome suddenly returned all at once. Fear, confusion, heartbreak. They flooded back in her chest like a storm. Across the room, Damien felt something unfamiliar. Regret. Not strategic regret. Personal regret. For years, he justified every decision through logic. Every action served a purpose. Every sacrifice supported a larger goal. Now none of those explanations mattered, because standing before him wasn't the enemy he once imagined. It was Lila, the woman who brought warmth into a life dominated by power and control. The woman who transformed a fortress into a home. The woman he never intended to care about. The realization hit harder than any betrayal from the past, because for the first time, Damien understood something undeniable. He loved her. The truth arrived too late. Lila's trust had already been broken, and broken trust could not be repaired with power, money, or promises. Later that afternoon, she packed quietly. No dramatic confrontation. No public scene. Just a woman protecting the last piece of herself she still controlled. The decision terrified her. Yet staying felt impossible. The mansion that once felt like a safe place now felt like a reminder of everything she misunderstood. When she finally left the estate, only a few people noticed. The housekeeper cried. Several staff members attempted to convince her to stay. Even members of Damien's security team looked genuinely disappointed. The reaction surprised her, because despite everything, she realized something important. The people inside the estate truly cared about her. The betrayal belonged to one man, not the entire family she found there. Meanwhile, tension spread throughout Damien's empire. Senior advisors noticed the change immediately. Their king stopped focusing on business. Meetings ended early. Reports remained unanswered. For the first time in years, emotion disrupted control. The whispers grew louder. Some blamed Lila. Others blamed Damien. Everyone understood one thing. The empire was changing, and nobody knew what came next. Days passed, then a week. Damien searched quietly, not because he wanted control, because he wanted redemption, because he wanted a chance to tell her the truth he should have revealed from the beginning. Unfortunately, another problem was already emerging. The news of Lila's departure spread beyond the empire. People who monitored Damien's life noticed her absence, including rival syndicates. The same organizations that once viewed her as untouchable now saw something different. Opportunity. Late one evening, an urgent intelligence report arrived. Damien opened the file expecting routine updates. Instead, his expression hardened instantly. Multiple rival groups were actively searching for Lila Bennett. Questions were being asked, locations investigated, resources deployed. The situation was escalating quickly. And the most terrifying part wasn't that Lila had disappeared. It was that she had disappeared alone. As Damien stared out across the dark Chicago skyline, a cold realization settled inside him. The woman he loved was gone. And now, powerful people were trying to find her before he could. Damien Cross spent a decade chasing revenge. In a single week, he realized losing Lila would hurt far more than any betrayal from the past. The Blackwood Empire had survived economic crises, political pressure, and syndicate conflicts. Yet nothing unsettled Damien Cross more than an empty room. Every morning, he passed the suite Lila once occupied. Every evening, he noticed the silence she left behind. The realization became impossible to ignore. Revenge had never made him happy. Power had never made him whole. Lila had, and now she was gone. For the first time in years, Damien stopped thinking like a king and started thinking like a man who had made the biggest mistake of his life. Within hours, the full resources of the Empire shifted toward a single objective: finding Lila Bennett. Private investigators searched across multiple states. Security teams reviewed transportation records. Trusted allies quietly followed leads. Every loyal member of the Blackwood Empire understood the assignment. This was no longer business. This was personal. The shift surprised many people. A decade earlier, Damien would have sacrificed almost anything to complete his revenge. Now he was willing to sacrifice revenge itself. Meanwhile, Lila had disappeared to a small coastal town several hours from Chicago. The location offered anonymity, quiet streets, and distance from the world she desperately needed to escape. For the first time in months, nobody knew where she was. Nobody expected anything from her. Yet peace remained frustratingly out of reach, because heartbreak traveled with her. Every morning, she told herself she hated Damien. Every evening, she found herself remembering the version of him who sat beside her grandmother during treatments. The version who walked with her through gardens. The version who made her feel safe. The contradiction hurt, because both versions were real. One built on deception, the other built on something she still didn't fully understand. Several weeks later, an unexpected package arrived at her temporary address. Inside were old family documents recovered during Damien's continuing investigation. At first she ignored them. Then curiosity won. The contents changed everything. Letters, financial records, private correspondence. The truth hidden inside those pages revealed something astonishing. The Bennett family had never betrayed Damien's father. They had been blamed, used, manipulated by people operating behind the scenes. For decades, the wrong family carried the weight of someone else's crime. Lila stared at the documents in disbelief. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded, because for the first time, she understood that her family wasn't responsible for the war that shaped her life. They were victims of it. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, from relief. Years of inherited guilt suddenly disappeared. The burden she never understood finally lifted. She was not a victim. She became powerful the moment she stopped accepting responsibility for sins she never committed. Across Chicago, Damien reached the same conclusion. His investigators uncovered identical evidence. The truth shattered everything he believed for 10 years. The enemy he hated never existed. The revenge he pursued was based on lies. The realization felt devastating. It's strangely freeing, because if the foundation of his revenge was false, then nothing stood between him and the truth he had been avoiding. He loved Lila, not because of obligation, not because of guilt, because she changed him, because she made him better, because she transformed a king obsessed with the past into a man capable of imagining a future. Days later, Damien finally found her, not through force, not through surveillance, through trust. A mutual acquaintance quietly passed along a message. An invitation, nothing more. The meeting took place beside a quiet harbor at sunset. The ocean stretched endlessly behind them, while golden light reflected across the water. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence carried months of emotions. Heartbreak, regret, hope, fear. Then understanding slowly replaced all of them. Lila saw something different in Damien. The control was still there. The power was still there. But the revenge was gone. For the first time, he looked like a man willing to admit he was wrong. And that mattered. More than she expected. Neither of them could erase the past. But they could choose what happened next. The possibility felt fragile, yet real. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, the distance between them finally began shrinking. The king had chosen love over revenge. And the woman who once feared her own future was beginning to see herself as something more. Something stronger. Something worthy of standing beside him. A queen in the making. But just as peace seemed within reach, another discovery emerged. Late that night, Damien received a confidential document recovered from archived syndicate records. The contents were shocking, because the evidence suggested his father's downfall had never come from an outside enemy. It came from someone much closer, someone trusted, someone welcomed into the family. As Damien stared at the name printed across the page, a cold realization settled over him. The greatest betrayal of all might have been committed by someone standing beside his father the entire time. She entered his life as a tool for revenge. She became the one person he could never lose. The document remained open on Damien Cross's desk long after midnight. For years, he believed he understood the story of his father's downfall. He believed he knew the enemy. He believed revenge would eventually bring peace. Now every assumption was collapsing. The evidence uncovered by investigators pointed towards someone nobody expected. Not a rival family. Not the Bennett bloodline. Not an outside syndicate. The betrayal came from within. A former business partner named Victor Hale. A man who spent decades earning trust inside Damien's father's inner circle. The discovery felt surreal. Victor had manipulated records, redirected blame, and carefully created a narrative that pointed suspicion toward innocent families. By the time the truth disappeared beneath years of misinformation, entire lives had already been destroyed, including Lila's, including Damien's. For several moments, he simply stared at the file. The anger he expected never arrived. Instead, exhaustion settled inside him, because the revenge he'd dedicated 10 years to pursuing had been built on a lie. And the only person who truly suffered from that lie was the woman he loved. Meanwhile, Lila quietly absorbed the same truth. The final pieces of her family's history finally made sense. The fear that haunted multiple generations was never deserved. The shame her parents carried. The sacrifices her grandmother made. The struggles that shaped her childhood. None of it came from guilt. It came from survival. Tears filled her eyes as years of emotional weight finally lifted. For the first time in her life, she stopped viewing herself as someone connected to a broken legacy. She saw herself clearly. A woman who survived. A woman who endured. A woman who refused to let the past define her future. She was not a victim. She became powerful. Not because she gained wealth. Not because she married a king. Because she finally understood her own worth. Several weeks later, Damien requested a private meeting at the same lakeside harbor where they last spoke. The setting felt symbolic. A place where truth replaced assumptions. A place where healing began. When Lila arrived, autumn sunlight reflected across the water while sailboats drifted quietly in the distance. For a few moments, neither moved. The silence carried history between them. Mistakes. Heartbreak. Growth. Then Damien did something nobody inside his empire had ever witnessed. He lowered his guard completely. No king. No syndicate leader, no billionaire, just a man acknowledging the damage he caused. He accepted responsibility for every decision, every secret, every moment he allowed revenge to matter more than honesty. The sincerity in his eyes made one thing clear. He wasn't asking for forgiveness because he deserved it. He was asking because he loved her. The realization settled softly between them. Not dramatic, not sudden, simply true. Lila looked at the man standing before her and saw someone very different from the person she married. The king obsessed with revenge no longer existed. In his place stood a man willing to sacrifice power, pride, and control to protect the future they could build together. And for the first time, forgiveness felt possible. Months passed. Peace gradually returned. Victor Hale's role in the old betrayal became public knowledge among those connected to the syndicate world. Long-buried truths surfaced. Families received answers they spent decades searching for. Most importantly, the cycle of revenge finally ended. The Blackwood Empire changed as well. People who once questioned Lila now respected her. Not because she married Damien, because she earned her place. She carried herself with quiet confidence. She listened when others spoke. She helped people without expecting recognition. She brought something rare into the empire: humanity. The transformation impressed everyone, including Damien. One winter evening, the Blackwood estate hosted its largest gathering in years. Influential leaders, trusted allies, and longtime friends filled the grand ballroom overlooking Lake Michigan. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the room. Music drifted through the air. Luxury surrounded everything. Yet the most important moment of the evening had nothing to do with wealth. It happened when Lila entered the ballroom. Wearing an elegant emerald gown, she moved through the room with confidence and grace. People noticed, not because she demanded attention, because she belonged. The frightened waitress who once worried about rent and hospital bills felt like a distant memory. This was a queen, a woman who faced fear and survived it, a woman who transformed pain into strength, a woman capable of standing beside a king as an equal. Across the room, Damien watched her approach. A rare smile appeared, because for the first time in years, everything felt complete. Not perfect, complete. Family surrounded them. Loyalty surrounded them. The empire accepted them. And beyond the windows, Chicago stretched across the horizon like a city finally at peace. Later that night, after guests departed in silence returned to the estate, Damien entered his private office. A single envelope rested on his desk. No return address. No explanation. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a faded photograph. Several unfamiliar men stood together beside a private aircraft. On the back, a handwritten note contained only one sentence: "The First Syndicate War never truly ended." Beneath the photograph rested another document, one dated decades before Damien was born. As he began reading, his expression slowly changed. Because the information connected multiple powerful families, hidden alliances, and secrets believed lost forever. And as winter snow drifted beyond the office windows, one unsettling realization settled into the room.